Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening and taking time out of your day to be here with the city for our public needs hearing. So this is public needs hearing for the 5-year HUD consolidation plan. This is going to be one of 5 hearings that the city is hosting. We've had one on Monday, Tuesday, and today is the 3rd meeting. And so this is to establish community priorities for the 5-year plan and also for the city's fiscal year 2024 and program year 2023 HUD allocations. And so I just wanted to go over briefly what those allocations are, which for Community Development Block Grant, the city has received just over $2.6 million. For the Home Investment Partnership Grant, or the Home Grant, we have received a little over $1.3 million. For the Emergency Solutions Grant, we have received $235,549. And so the needs assessment meetings are a requirement for HUD that give an opportunity for citizen participation and to help develop the plan. And so we want to make sure that y'all understand we do value your input in this. And as well, we have a representative from M&L Associates, which is Bill Wazaleski, and he will be facilitating the meeting and going through a presentation with you. But before we start, I have just a couple of housekeeping items. Just want to make sure everybody's aware of. First and foremost, the restrooms. If anybody needs that, out the door here to the left, and then a right at the next hallway, or a left. I think the women's are on the right, the men's restrooms are on the left. There is a microphone here in the middle of the room that will pick up all of our conversations. Will pick you up as you're seating up from your seat, so you can provide your input and feedback to us from that location. We also have available to you some pads that you can write that down if you don't want to give that out loud. And I'll also give you some email addresses that you can send your input to later on. We'll have that as well. I would, at this point in time, like to introduce that we have our council member, Mr. Jim Klein, who's with us. He's our at-large member. We also have in the room our assistant city manager, Neiman Young. Okay. And also city staff that is here and available to assist in answering any questions that you have or making any clarifications. So at this time, I'd like to invite Councilman Mr. Klein up to make some opening remarks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, my name is Jim Klein. I'm an at-large member of the Corpus Christi City Council. I can't thank you enough for coming tonight. I just want to echo her remarks here. Can't thank you enough for doing this. I know we're all busy, but this is how government works. This is how we get government of, by, and for the people, is by attending sessions like this, because you folks know what's best in your community and your neighborhoods as well or better than I do, and you have better, maybe as well or better ideas than I have about what we should be doing citywide here now as well regarding a homeless population, but also kind of the underserved or the less well-served housed population as well. And so I can't thank you enough for coming tonight. Councilman Beretta, my colleague, District 3 councilman, is going to be out of town tonight, so he could not attend. He certainly would be here if he could attend, if he's going to be in town. So thank you so much for coming. I can't appreciate you enough for taking time to do this, and we'll get started.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. All right, so at this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Bill. He's going to take you through the presentation, and once he's completed that, we'll give you an opportunity to ask any questions you have about the presentation itself. And then we'll transition into the input portion of the meeting, where you can provide some input on the plan and what you feel are the priorities for these funds that come into the city to assist our community. So with that, Bill, turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you, Councilman, and also thank you for all of you for showing up tonight. It is really important that we get comments as we develop this plan. This is the first step in developing this plan for the next 5 years. And so I just want to thank you for taking time out of your day for coming. And then just 2 other housekeeping things. First, we are recording this session for internal use only. So this will not be published or anything like that. It's just for our internal information to go back and listen to it to make sure we captured all the comments and input that you've provided during this session. And then secondarily, I just kind of wanted to provide a little bit of a recap. This, as they said, this is the third meeting this week, and the kind of general theme that we've been hearing going through these meetings is the dire need for assistance services for the homeless, emergency shelters, no barrier shelters, and we did hear that loud and clear. So I just wanted to provide some context to what we've been hearing and some things things we've been hearing, and also the dire need for affordable housing within the community. So with that said, I just want to kind of just set up the evening here. I'm going to go through a very quick PowerPoint presentation here shortly to kind of provide an overview of the planning process, a 5-year plan, and what these programs entail, what you can do, what you can't do, the allocations. But really, we want to reserve the majority of the time this evening for input, valuable input that will help the city in terms of developing its priorities and priority needs moving into for the next 5 years to help address the high priority needs within the city. So if you bear with me for 1 second here, I'm going to try to share my screen with everybody. Okay, so as you can see, as we indicated, this is the Council District 3 Public Needs Meeting for the 2023 to 2027 5-year HUD Consolidated Plan and the fiscal year 24 program year 23 annual action plan needs hearings for the Community Development Block Grant Home and Emergency Solutions Grant Program. Again, just a little bit more detail on the agenda, provided this in my opening comments, but what I want to provide you a little bit more context. We're going to go over the overview of the HUD 5-year consolidated plan and the planning process, provide some detail related to the schedule. And then for context for discussion, we're going to provide a little bit of overview of the fiscal year 18 to 2022 HUD 5-year CP priorities. And that's just to kind of give you a sense of 5 years ago what the city felt that the high priority needs were and the types of activities that they felt were needing to be funded in order to address those priorities. And it's our goal, again, to think about how those priorities may be changing due to changing conditions on the ground. And again, really thinking about it from an affordable housing perspective, a community development perspective, as well as a homeless and housing needs perspective. We're also going to provide a little bit of overview of how the city allocated funds for program year 2024, fiscal year 2024 and program year 2023 use of its federal funds. And then just wanted to provide some overview of the CDBG home and ESG basics. What is eligible, what is not eligible, how much the city anticipates receiving, and that sort of thing, just so you can see what's eligible, what's not eligible. I will say that these program funds, the city receives their allocation annually from HUD. They do not determine how much they get in CDBG, home, or ESG. It is a formulaic determination made by HUD, and it's always based on the federal fiscal budget for each given year. And there's an internal formula that HUD uses for every community in the country, and that is that formula that determines the allocation amounts under all these funding programs, in case you're wondering. And then finally, we're going to stop presenting on the 5-year plan and on the overview, and we really want to get input, real input on what's going on within the community and what you feel the needs are from a housing and community development perspective. So what is a HUD 5-year consolidated plan? So a HUD 5-year consolidated plan is required for all what we call federal HUD entitlement communities like Corpus Christi. The city's program period covers October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2028. And what goes into a HUD consolidated plan? It's a number of things that's required by HUD. That HUD provides the city with a template that they have to respond to and provide questions and answers to those those requests, and that's why we structure getting input from both the community and stakeholders. And so I just want to kind of go through those components in a little bit more detail. First off, we are absolutely required to get stakeholder consultation, and what that means, we do that in a number of different ways. So these sessions that we're having within the council districts is one way that we get general public input on the plan. We also are planning in April to have a stakeholder consultation session for those who work directly with persons who are low to moderate income, provide programs and activities to help persons who are low to moderate income. Those basically working with those populations and subpopulations across the city in order to get their input on the changing needs and needs within the city under these programs. And not only are we taking input from the general public and stakeholders within the community, but we're also using real data. So we're going to carry out a housing and homeless needs assessment that will include also a housing market analysis. And that's done in a number of different ways. Each year, HUD will provide to the city updated census information and numbers related to housing and community development and homelessness. So we will absolutely use that. In terms of the housing market analysis, we will look at various census statistics and information that we get during the stakeholder consultation sessions. We'll absolutely and encourage organizations, individuals within the community to provide any additional analysis or reports that they've done that report on needs on the housing market or condition, so that we can supplement what HUD has provided us from a housing and market condition, housing and homeless needs assessment perspective. We were asked this at each of our last two meetings, so I want to make sure that I inform everybody. We will also and are required to incorporate the most current point in time survey as it relates to homelessness. So as soon as that assessment is completed, we'll absolutely analyze that and incorporate that, as well as any other local information related to homeless needs, homeless service needs, so that we're adequately capturing what the current needs are within the community. And those three things, the market analysis, the stakeholder consultation, as well as the input from the general public, really provides the background for the development of the strategic plan, which is the key component of the 5-year plan. And it basically looks at all those things that we've received, and then it also helps the city to determine their priorities or high priority needs within the community, in which they will use to determine how they allocate resources over the next 5 years. In addition to the 5-year plan, we're also preparing an annual action plan for activities for program year 2023, which is actually October 2023 to September 30th, 2024. And this is a key piece of information. We must submit this plan to HUD no later than August 15, 2023, or the city will lose its federal resources. And that will absolutely happen. We will absolutely submit this plan to HUD before August 15th, and I'll provide a little bit more detail on the schedule as we move forward. This just kind of provides some additional context, as I outlined in my last slide. We have to do this 5-year consolidated plan every year, and currently the city is under its fiscal year 2018 to 2022 5-year plan. It's the last year of the 5-year plan, and that's why we're going through this process, really to relook at the needs, see what's happened over the last 5 years, to see how things have changed on the ground and how priorities have changed, so that the city can be well informed in order to make funding decisions for activities that are eligible under these programs. And then every year during the 5-year plan period, an annual action plan must be prepared, and it tells what activities it intends to spend its annual HUD allocations on. And as I said previously, this plan will include the first year of the new 5-year consolidated plan for fiscal year 24, program year 2023. So as I said, just as a point of context for discussion purposes, the city's 5-year CP high priorities for the period of 2018 to 2022 are, as you see on the screen. The city really felt 5 years ago that there was a real need to increase affordable housing for 0 to 30% of AMI households. They did that by allocating funding for housing rehabilitation programs, home buyer programs, and emergency housing repair programs to benefit those 0 to 30% households. They also felt 5 years ago that public facilities and infrastructure improvements were critical and high priority need. And that included, as you can see, sidewalk improvements, curb and accessibility improvements, and street improvements in low-mod areas. Blight removal as well was a high priority related to demolition and removal of blight across the city. Addressing homelessness was also a very high priority, and the city actually allocated funds to support homeless efforts, as well as provide operational support to emergency shelter through its Emergency Solutions Grant. And then with its CDBG funds, it allocated its maximum allowable public services, which it included code enforcement, senior services, and broadband connectivity. These programs also require administration and planning and making sure they stay in compliance with HUD. So there's a portion of the funds were budgeted to administration and planning for these programs. So for program year 2022 annual action plan, what did the city allocate its funds for the final year of its last 5-year plan? Under the CDBG program, you can see there, the city allocated funds for a home repair program, a utility assistance program. They paid staffing costs related to code enforcement in low-mod areas. They provided public service funds to a meal truck, as well as a generator for that meal truck, and admin and delivery related costs for these programs. The home program, which is a sister program to the Community Development Block Grant Program, but it focuses on providing affordable housing for low to moderate income persons up to 80% of AMI. The city allocated funding for a single family rehabilitation program. It provided funding for affordable rental housing construction, again, for 0 to 30% AMI households. It provided funding for tenant-based rental assistance, or TBRA. It also provided homeownership, new construction funds for a project carried out by Habitat for Humanity, again, for persons under 80% of AMI. And then it also provided funds for administration of that program. And then finally, under the Emergency Solution Grant Program, which is primarily funding going to homeless, to address homeless needs within the city provided operating assistance for the emergency shelter to assist homeless families. And those funds went to Corpus Christi House and the Salvation Army, and again, administration under that program. So that brings us to how we're, again, as I said, we're in our last year of the last 5-year plan. And so now our task is to help the city identify those priority needs within the community for the period of 2023 to 2027. And how do we determine what those priorities will be for the next 5 years? The process will include the following. I think I talked a little bit about this previously, but we're trying to get input from the community on community development and housing needs from these council district meetings. We're trying to get input from local stakeholders who serve persons who are low and moderate, who serve persons who are low to moderate income, again, below 80% AMI. And that'll occur during the month of April. We haven't set the formal date yet, but it will be during the month of April. We're also going to be running a community-wide survey that will be conducted in April and May, which by being a part of these meetings, you will receive notification. It'll be on the city's website, and it's basically an opportunity for general public, again, another opportunity for the general public to provide input on needs related to community development and affordable housing needs within the city. And then finally, we're going to use updated demographic data and or census data as provided by HUD, supplemented obviously with local information reports that we receive from local stakeholders or organizations that are assisting these persons who are low to moderate income. Just a little bit more detail on the fiscal year 2024-2023 program year 2023 schedule. So in order to all the 5-year planning things that we'll be doing, applications for funding assistance for organizations who want to apply for these dollars will be sent out on April 1st, and they are due back at the city by May 1st so that the city can review and make recommendations based on identified new high priority needs within the city. We are required to put this consolidated plan and annual action plan on public display for a period of 30 days. At this point, we're anticipating putting the plan on display between June 19th and July 17th of this year. We're also required by HUD to have a second public hearing that basically reports back. We prepared a new 5-year consolidated plan. We have a draft annual action plan, and we're required to tell the public what those high priorities are in the new plan, as well as the proposed activities for 2023. And so we will carry out and inform the general public when that'll be so that you can participate in a session similar to this and provide comments on that draft 5-year plan and annual action plan. We anticipate having that in mid-July at some point, and we'll absolutely inform you when that occurs so that you have the ample opportunity to review the draft plan and provide public comment. And finally, we need to have City Council approve this, and that's anticipated by the end of July. They're one of their last meetings in July, or the second to last meeting in July. They will approve this draft plan. Again, that will then give us ample enough time to get this submitted to HUD on or before August 15th, 2023. And we have to submit this in the HUD IDIS program. That requires us to do that as we submit this to HUD. I think Tracy provided this information, but I just wanted to reiterate, HUD has provided the city with its 2023 allocations. And so for the program year 2023, CDBG funds, the city will receive a little over 2.6 billion in CDBG dollars, home funds a little over 1.3 million, and ESG 235,000. So just so we're all on the same page in terms of what's eligible and not eligible, just kind of wanted to quickly run through some slides on the CDBG program, home program, and emergency solutions program. So basic eligibilities under CDBG, we can only fund eligible activities as under this program. As you can see on the screen, eligible activities include housing rehabilitation, homeownership assistance, public facilities and improvements such as street improvements, curb cuts, and handicap accessibility. Blight removal, which includes demolition of blighted structures, code enforcement, economic development, acquisition, disposition of real property, and public services. The city is not required to fund all these. It's allowed to choose and select activities that will identify high priority needs in its plan as it moves forward. Wanted to call this out. So CDBG Public Services, the city is only allowed to allocate 15% of its CDBG grant annually towards these types of activities. And you can see on the right-hand side there what some examples of public services include. And so they're limited to only 15% of its allocation can go towards public services. Not only do we have to ensure that it's an eligible activity under CDBG, but that activity must meet at least one of the following three national objectives. The project or activity that is funded must benefit low to moderate income persons, and at least 70% of each program year's grant must go to benefit low to moderate income persons via activities. So 70% of the funds have to go to benefit low to moderate income persons. Only 30% or up to 30% can benefit the elimination or prevention of blight. Not required, but no more than 30% can go towards that. And then finally, a little used national objective called urgent need, and that's when health and welfare are threatened. Very little used, usually for when a natural disaster happens to help clean up after a natural disaster, but generally that's very, very rarely used. So we talked about what are some eligible costs. Eligible costs include administration costs related to personnel and staff, office or rental or lease costs, material supplies and communications. And also, there are some things that are not eligible, and we definitely wanted to make sure everyone's tuned into what are ineligible costs under the CDBG program. That includes fundraising, political activities, expenses to carry out responsibilities or functions of your local government, income payments, building or portion thereof used for general conduct of government, and purchase of equipment and fixtures. Again, those are just examples. It's not a full list of eligible, ineligible costs, but it just gives you a sample of what's not eligible under the CDBG program. As I said earlier, the sister program is the Home Investment Partnerships Program, is a sister program to CDBG. However, the difference is all the funds under home and activities are really for the development and of affordable housing units for low to moderate income persons. Eligible activities include housing rehabilitation, homeownership assistance, new construction of affordable rental or for sale housing, and tenant-based rental assistance. We must also keep in mind with the home program, a minimum set aside of 15% of each year's Home allocation must be set aside for CHODOs, which are community development organizations. They're special community-based organizations that focus on providing affordable housing to low to moderate income persons within the community, and they must meet certain board composition requirements as outlined by HUD. So a minimum of those 15% of those home funds must go to CHODOs. And finally, ESG, that's the Emergency Solutions Grant Program. These funds are exclusively used for homelessness and to address homelessness. Eligible activities include street outreach, homeless prevention, operational costs for shelters, rapid rehousing, HMIS, which is the computer system that used to track homelessness within the community, and then various administrative activities. So before we get into the questions and input on needs for the next 5 years, I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands who the contacts are. As Tracy said in her opening comments, you can provide comments tonight during this session, or you could provide written comments, email comments, or phone, and provide any type of written communication to Letitia, Tracy, or Nora Vargas. And Nora, if you're not familiar, she is the city's homeless services program manager. So she's really in charge of the homeless policy across the city. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. If you bear with me for a second. And I'm going to turn it back over to Tracy. First off, is there any questions on anything I presented related to CDBG home ESG eligibility, 5-year consolidated plans, anything related to process or planning? Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm just not familiar with a lot of the initials. Could you explain exactly what CDBG, ESG, and AMI all stand for? What those acronyms are?
Yes, I'm sorry. So CDBG is a acronym for the Community Development Block Grant Program. It's an annual allocation of block grant assistance that the city receives from HUD to carry out eligible activities under that program. ESG was the next one you asked?
Yes.
ESG is a similar program, and it stands for Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and it's for homeless services and homeless shelter operational costs. And then AMI is area median income, and what that is published annually by HUD. Their income range is published by HUD, and these funds must benefit, home and CDBG must benefit families or persons who are at or below 80% of the area median income annually.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, I think you had a question as well?
Yes, I also had some definition questions. I know these might be a bit complicated, so if it's too complex to explain at this time, then feel free to just point me in the right direction. But I was wondering what exactly the single family rehabilitation program and the tenant-based rental assistance mean exactly, because I have some ideas, but I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding.
Okay.
Do you want me to answer that, Tracy, or do you want? I can do it.
Yeah, please, Bill, go ahead.
So just generally, and again, I don't know how the city's program works, but generally the city will provide funding or CDBG or home funding for single family housing rehabilitation to families who are 80% or below area median income. And what that is if your house is in need of repairs, if it's non-code compliant, the city can provide funds for that homeowner to rehabilitate its house to address real needs. And again, I don't know the specifics of the city's program, but generally that's what that is. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second question that you, TBRA. So tenant-based rental assistance. And if you think about tenant-based rental assistance, what that is it's a rental subsidy. So for example, if you are a low-income person, the idea is that you shouldn't be paying more than 30% of your income towards your housing expenses on a monthly basis. And so if the city provides tenant-based rental assistance to an organization, they can supplement those rent costs so that to ensure that that household or that person is not paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. And that difference between what 30% of the income is towards rent and the actual rent cost, that's what we call a rental subsidy. And that's what these funds would use to pay for, that difference between what you can afford to pay for rent and what the actual rent is.
One of the things I want to add to the TIBRA is the city has to be in partnerships with the agency, and then the agency as a subrecipient has partnerships with apartment complexes that are willing to accept the TIBRA program. So that's a big key to the success of the program. And the single family rehab program that we have in-house, and going just based on what Bill said, we not only do we help rehab, but we also provide for the actual demolition and reconstruction of the home if the house is 51% or more just substandard.
Yeah, Leticia is our program manager, and so that's her email address that you saw at the screen, and so she can provide you with some additional information about how the programs are applied locally, if you have further questions about that. Do we have any other questions about the presentation itself and what Bill was explaining as far as that goes? All right. Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. If you'll continue to hang out with us, though, we like to transition now for the input part of the program. So if there are things that you all have thought of that might be priorities in your area that these funds can be applied to, if you have any ideas on that, you want to speak to that, you're welcome to do that at this time. And again, we have also some notepads, and we provided the email addresses if you choose to do it in a way other than in the open forum. But does anybody have some feedback for us regarding these programs? Sure.
The stakeholder meeting, I'm assuming it's I know it's going to be like a meeting of people who work with the affected populations, namely like low income or unhoused folks. Is it okay, or I'm trying to think of a better way to phrase this. Can the people who are directly affected, that is like people who are low income or unhoused, can they attend the meeting even if they're not like an official member of these programs other than like a recipient, or would they strictly have to be in the second public comment thing?
So, I'm going to let you do that. I mean, I go ahead and address that.
For the stakeholder meetings, so the needs assessment meetings is for the general public. The stakeholder meetings are exclusive, not necessarily exclusive to the stakeholders. If there's folks that wish to attend, I think Bill is willing to accommodate that. So for those, it gives you another opportunity to give feedback.
And I also think the stakeholder meetings are a bit more technical in nature because they discuss the application process for the program and how these agencies go about becoming participants in the program and the funding and how that's allocated. So it's a bit more technical in nature. It's not that it's not open to, the public can attend. It's just, and Alan, if you want to add to that, go ahead.
We talk about program framework.
Yes.
And thresholds.
The general public is considered stakeholders as well.
Right.
So these are taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
So
again, yes, you public is welcome to attend. It's just the format of the meeting is a bit different. It shifts to, again, a bit more technical in nature. But anybody is welcome to join. So. Okay.
And not only is it technical in nature, but we really want to pick the brains of these organizations to really get a feel for how things are changing, how conditions are changing in the field. So, for example, over the last 5 years, we've gone through a pandemic. How has the housing conditions changed on the ground? How are are rents increasing? If so, how high are rents increasing? Is it how unaffordable is housing? What are how are housing prices going up, and is it affordable for persons to afford that? And the reason that we structure in those types of manners is really to get informed conditions that we can report back to the city to say, hey, look, you may want to consider thinking about these different priorities because they're real needs that have changed over the last 5 years, and you may want to consider thinking about how these conditions have changed over the last 5 years. So they are a little bit more technical in nature, and again, they do go into a little bit more depth in the programmatic perspective as well.
Anyone else?
Does the city have a system where they look at the infill of the city instead of always annexing outward to where you have empty lots and that? And are you looking at anything like tiny houses or a community area that would be more amenable to people of low income?
Yes, ma'am. So some parts of that are part of our infill housing program, but you do bring up a good point, and we've heard that as far as the cottage style housing communities and so forth, and so that those are great ideas, and it's something that could be looked at as far as incorporating into that affordable housing programs, and so.
So you want to add to it, and Nora's not here, but they actually do have an infill incentive program now where you can get incentives for actually building on infill lots. That's provided through the city.
And there are incentives, there are incentives for both the buyer, and a second part of that is also for the builders. So there's two parts to that, and so that is available now, even though not set up in those specific type of communities, but we are looking at infill and working on infill housing programs. And yes, ma'am.
So if new affordable housing is built and say someone is still struggling, even if they're unable to pay less than 30% of their income towards affordable housing or any of these programs, how are they protected? What rights do they have to ensure that they're not evicted? Because that's a lot of what happened during the pandemic, and why we have more people out on the streets of more unhoused people is because there was no rights protecting them as tenants. I don't know the percentage of people who are part of these programs, but can a program in the future with this new 5-year plan include protections for tenants and the most vulnerable people?
Sure, and that's a great idea. We do have tenant rights programs that are there. Some of that is facilitated through our fair housing. Alvin, if you want to.
So for the tenant-based rental assistance program, the city, which is called the presiding jurisdiction, is required to set a minimum payment standard for that tenants have to pay. I don't believe it can be set at $0, but it can be set at like $10, $15, $20, something manageable that is well below the 30%. So just because someone still don't have the income to pay the 30% doesn't mean they'll be losing their place to live, their apartment. So.
And we also have a fair housing unit in-house in the neighborhood services department, and they answer those types of calls and complaints.
And also with the tenant-based rental assistance programs, there is often some case management that goes along with that follows that a person who's received the benefits, follows them through that process. So that's different from just your rental assistance programs that were around during COVID and just, here's the money that you owe your landlord. This is a little bit different because it is a program that follows that participant and gives them some additional assistance that's available to them. But like I said, so there are some tenant rights programs as well. So it's kind of a multifold answer to your question. So hopefully that helps.
Can I add one thing, Tracy?
Yes, sir.
Two things as well. So these funds, that's part of the stakeholder process. So when we're interviewing stakeholders, if that emerges as a key issue, hey, there's been a lot of eviction going on related to persons who are very low income as a result of increasing rents. That's a real good indicator that there's a real issue. We do look at evictions statistics at the city to make sure to see how those have changed and the trend that's occurring over time. But also, if that is going on, these federal funds are required to be entered into these, for these organizations. We can control some of that in terms of through our agreements that, hey, look, if you're a landlord, we're recruiting new landlords, but as part of your participation in this program, you got to work with us in terms of guaranteeing no eviction or working with us to prevent as much as we can evictions. So that's another key piece that we talk about during the stakeholder sessions as well, to kind of identify what the issues are and the best way to address them and to prevent them from happening in the future.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Bill.
Can anything be done for people who, I guess they're above that threshold of moderate income, and it, might sound ridiculous that why would they need assistance, but we do see people that did lose their homes or couldn't afford their mortgage or the programs, whatever assistance ran out, and these people who were, well off are just now they or hit rock bottom and they didn't have really any way to protect themselves, is there an opportunity for them to be able to take part in that program in some sense?
Well, I know with all the programs that there are varying income requirements that are going to be met, but as you heard, some of them are as low as 30% of the average median income, and some are as much as 80%. So it's a varying degree of that, and I just want to pass that off to some of
Right,
my staff.
and the agencies have several programs, all the local agencies we fund. Of course, we fund particular programs, but they have a wealth of other programs with different criteria that could probably meet the specific population that you're describing.
We'll definitely make note of that as some feedback and input on, can that be made, more widely available.
Is the average median income now?
In Corpus Christi,
Yes.
I printed that out actually, so I brought that with me. So I did, because we've been asked that a couple different times, and so we received the 2022 adjusted home income limits from HUD, and so in Corpus Christi, at 30%. And it varies because of the number of persons in a family, but one person, that's just a little over $16,000 a year. And so at 60%, I believe we're up to about 43,000, just a little over that. And then that goes up depending on how many persons are in that family. So, if we're talking about a 4-person family, the 30% is a little over 23,000, and low income for a 4-person, for 60% would be up to 62,000. So it's a sliding scale depending on the number of people in the family.
And how accessible are these programs to people? Because it seems that for a whole lot of people, they're just kind of cowed by poverty, and they're kind of afraid to ask or don't know where to go or who. How does the city do outreach?
We've got various channels that we do outreach. I mean, obviously, the main thing is we make the information as readily available as we can. It is on our website. We hold public meetings to make people aware of this. We have outreach coordinators that go out into the community to speak with individuals that are at risk of homelessness or who are experiencing homelessness. And so that's what our neighborhood services staff does on a regular basis, on a daily basis, and contacting through our service providers in the community. So we partner with our service providers extensively to make sure that information is out there and available to residents.
Could anybody going to City Hall, for example, could find out just?
Yes, absolutely. They come up and visit us on the second floor of City Hall, and we've got a department full of people who are there to provide them with that information and give them some assistance on applying for those programs.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Who are your service providers?
We've got a host of service providers.
Such as, is it
Yes,
like
yes.
churches or?
And I'll let Leticia answer that. She's more familiar with it.
Sure. So depending on the type of grant, so for ESG, we provide funding for Salvation Army, Corpus Christi Hope House, Endeavors, who strictly provide services for veterans. For home, affordable housing developers, and those vary, multiple names across the board. If you ever heard of Village at McCardle, Palms at Blucher, Village at Henderson, Palms at Leopard, those are all developers that we work with. And then for CDBG, multiple agencies, Rising Tide Ministries, who has homeless initiatives, we fund them. Interdepartment, we fund them as well for facility improvements. Those are some examples.
For the home program, does I forget how it said, like CHDO, since they are a recipient of at least some of that funding, do they need to be like a registered nonprofit or like a church, a charity, or what are the requirements? Could it just be like does it have to be like something registered that's like got a license and everything?
It does have to be a nonprofit, and I'll let Alvin speak to that with a little bit more detail. They do have to go through an application process to get qualified as a charter before they get funding. Did you want to add anything to that, Chodo?
So the Chodo, has to be a nonprofit, and they have to be a nonprofit, who develops, affordable housing. So that has to be part of their mission to develop, affordable housing, and that's verified through all their,
Their nonprofit stuff.
their nonprofit. They also have to meet a board configuration requirement, meaning they need to have some low income representation on their board. So they know, what
You're dealing with.
what they're dealing with. A board full of rich people cannot decide what, low income people need. So they have to have that board configuration, and that's a requirement, and it's not waived at all. It can either be board members who live in a low income area. It can be board members who are actually low income, at or below 80% AMI. Or it can be personnel who are elected as by a neighborhood organization to represent them on the board.
And I wanted to add to that this participating Chodos, there's an extensive application process that goes through the state of Texas, and in order for them to receive those tax credits. And so they don't receive the funding from the city. So they are not a direct recipient of any of these funds that we're talking about, but they do seek a support from the city. And so often, you'll at least once a year, we'll have an organization who comes to the city for a letter of support, so that they can present that as part of their application and approval process through the state in order to be able to receive those tax credits.
Okay. And
If I could add one other thing too, any recipient of any organization who receives home funds must have a demonstrated track record, a good track record of being able to create and carry out home assisted projects. It's a HUD requirement, and that they have financial capacity that if their project goes belly up, they're able to repay these home funds back to the city and back to HUD if their project fails.
And I suppose, are there any examples you could give of what exactly homeownership assistance would look like for CDBG or home? Would it be something like mortgage assistance or just like a tax credit? If it's too complex to get into at the moment, I understand, but.
I could answer that if you want.
All right, please, Bill, go.
Sure. So home buyer assistance can take one or two different forms. So either assistance could be provided to the home buyer to help pay for what we call down payment and closing cost assistance if they don't have enough cash to close on their mortgage. And then also it could be in the form of a soft second mortgage, which means basically if you go to a bank and apply for a mortgage, generally the bank has to feel comfortable that your financial situation, that they feel comfortable lending up to 80% of the value of the house. But if they don't, if they say they only feel comfortable, giving you 60% of a mortgage, these mortgage type programs, these home buyer assistance programs could come in and provide what we call a soft second mortgage to make up that 20% to get you 80%. I know that's complicated, and I don't know if Leticia has anything to add to that, but that's generally what home buyer assistance is.
Yes. All right, thank you, Bill. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I had several questions, and they're all more or less related towards the homelessness question.
Okay.
One of them is there actually a written statement of a city strategy for ending homelessness in black and white?
So I know that is being developed and revised as we speak. Our homelessness division is relatively new in the city, and so this is something that they have been working on, quite extensively. Amanda, if you want to add anything to that as far as
100% correct.
Okay. So we are working on it. So yes, but Amanda is our outreach coordinator. And so she is our person who's out there, you know, again, making contact with our individuals, making those connections to our service providers for those that are at risk.
So it's coming.
Yes, it's coming.
Okay. So looking back at the 1.3 million for the homeless programs, I'm wondering how much is actually staff and office expenses, or if that's strictly for services.
Okay, that's the,
What fund?
she was talking about homeless, but I think the amount of money you're talking about is under the CDBG.
Right, no, actually home.
Yeah, the
is a
home program, yes.
1.3.
Home is
So-
20% of home funding can be allocated for administration.
Okay, and what about for the emergency solutions? To me, the 235,000 for emergency shelters seems extremely low. Especially when you're looking at, you know, millions of dollars. I'm curious as to how that breakdown happened.
Well, again, that's done, you know, through HUD, and so that's not a determination that the city makes. We don't decide what those amounts are. As Bill was talking about, there's a formula that HUD has established for all cities, and so that's predetermined. You know, it's an allocation to us, so we get, you know, what we get.
So can it be, can there be a negotiation on that subject? In other words, can it ever be raised, or is that all you get for that?
It's based on the HUD, or I'm sorry, it's based on the annual federal budget as determined. Once the federal fiscal budget is determined in Washington, that determines what the overall allocation goes to HUD nationwide, and then HUD uses its internal formula to break out based on low-income population, poverty, that sort of things, blighting conditions. There's an internal formula that they use that they don't share that really calculates the allocation amounts for each community across the country. And I just want to briefly clarify the administrative caps for each of these programs because they're different. CDBG has an administrative cap of no more than 20% of the funds going towards that administrative costs. Home's administrative cap is 10%, and ESG's cap is 7.5%. I just want to make sure we're all clear on those caps.
Now, I would like to add that the city did receive an additional $4.2 million for the home ARP plan, and we're actually working through the approval of that plan with City Council. We go to our second reading next Tuesday on the 28th, and so those monies actually came in into 2021, and we have
We're done with
7 years. Is that
23rd.
until 2030 to spend those allocated funds. And so we are currently working on the approval of that plan so that can be submitted back to HUD for final approval. And then we begin implementing that plan. And like I said, we have those dollars until 2030. So that will supplement.
What is that plan called again?
It's called the Home ARP plan. And so that will supplement those funds that you're talking about with the ESG.
And I don't want to hog the time, but first of all, I'm kind of wishing it was more than a 1 hour cut out for time, but
well, you're welcome to come. We have 2 more sessions. So we have one tomorrow and one on Monday.
that was something else I wondered about. If you're from one district, are you allowed, if you missed it or you wanted to say, you can come to any other?
Absolutely, you can come to any of these. We
I don't
had
necessarily
folks
plan.
from District 1 that attended the District 1 meeting, and then they also attended the District 2 meeting, but absolutely.
I do know a couple of people that had to miss.
Sure, including our council member, he's at large, so he's been to, 2 of our meetings, so he's doing great.
So the last thing I wanted to bring up, and it may already be totally known, so I won't talk too much about it, but there is a newish group at the moment, sort of headed up by Father Bruce Wilson, that is connected, we're deciding on a name, but we'll call it Housing First. And the idea is that there's many places all across the country that do this whole different approach, which is providing the housing and then the wraparound services supporting people. And I know it's not a new concept, but it's not being done here. And but anyway, we're connecting with the Texas Homelessness Network. We are connecting with Community Solutions. We're connecting with something called Built for Zero. And the whole point is that we're not wanting to reinvent the wheel. We're wanting to pull together, and most of the few meetings I've attended had voices of the homeless So that was wonderful. They were actually a perspective. They wanted to speak. They had ideas that were very interesting, actually. And other places like the Salvation Army and different places that are already providing services. And then there's some home builders from the valley that are actually interested in building on places that are available. So all these things are towards collaboration so that we have, everyone has a set amount of money. No one has enough. That's obvious. So if we can work out really providing the services that the person needs without making them go through a lot of hoops and providing them with the security, that's what this particular group is all about. Because that's the biggest fear of the homeless, is that they can't really close their eyes and sleep comfortably at night if they don't have a door that locks, for fear of their stuff being stolen, for fear of them being attacked, et cetera, et cetera. It's not a new issue, but it needs to be brought up that if we can put some of these monies, and I know I'm jumping all over the place. I've been involved in the point of time count a few times. That's just a snapshot. It is certainly not the be all end all of how many people we actually have. So no one's under the illusion, and I know anybody in this business would say, that's not all we've got. So out of sight doesn't mean they don't exist. And they, I just want to bring that up because I feel like there's no one here that can really necessarily say that out loud. And I'm not homeless. I'm lucky to be one of the few that has no concerns about another meal or a home. But my concern as a retired social worker has always been for the low income and people that don't have a voice. So that's one of the reasons I'm here, is to find out how we can maximize the money and how we can maximize the services and not make them have too many rules that you already know they can't. It's very difficult and I don't want to speak for the homeless, but from the ones I know, they don't do well with a lot of rules.
Yes. I think you're hitting the nail on the head with that. Absolutely.
End of speech.
So, thank you. All right. I don't know if anybody from staff wanted to contribute, but I think you covered it. I mean, the collaboration is absolutely, what's needed, because like you said, no one organization is going to have all the resources and all the funds to make that happen. So I think that's a very important point. So, all right, well, we are at 7 o'clock, but if we got, 1 or 2 more comments, we can do that.
I'll try to be quick. Is there any plan for the city to, if not form its own organization or subdivision or whatever that is strictly focused on this thing and therefore funded strictly completely under the city and therefore accountable to the citizens? Is there a plan to form say a collaborative kind of thing where if third parties are brought in, like charities or things like that are brought in, that there will be consequences if they say act in bad faith or misuse funds? Is there plans for this?
So that the city is accountable, is what
Yes.
you're trying to say.
Yeah.
So it's something you can kind of track it through and make sure that funds are being spent right.
Yes, because these charities do good work a lot of the times. They are ultimately accountable to their board. And even if they burn a city, there's still other cities that they can go to.
Well, as far as the funds that are allocated to us, I mean, we do track that, we monitor that, and there's accountability for those organizations as far as, their expenses using the funds that come into the city. So if that helps to answer your question, and I mean.
Mainly, I wonder about accountability. The city is accountable to the people here.
Yes.
If someone does a bad job and there's enough complaints about it, they can get fired. And there's and I know that there is technically a roughly equivalent thing of if enough people in the city complain about a nonprofit, there can be something done about it. But it's not the same as being accountable to the people directly. Is there something that the city plans to do that is in direct line accountable to the people?
So a couple of things with that. It's a good question. So when they apply for funding, specifically for HUD funds that we are managing, we are actually the grantees who are responsible. We do go through a notice of funding availability process. In that process, you have to meet the criteria and you have to show documentation. Along with that, we rate them and assign a risk assessment to them. For example, like the track record that Bill was referring to. They have to show performance, they have to show their board buildup. There's just a slew of things that we look at and documents that are provided to us. Along with that, we also monitor them as they're going through the process. Going back to Tracy's point, as they submit invoices for payment, we're looking at those for eligible costs and so on and so forth. And then we send letters, we go out to their sites. I mean, we monitor them fairly closely. And should there be an issue for those agencies, I'm speaking specifically to the agencies that we fund through these programs, then those conversations begin and we catch them early enough, whether it's through payments or whatever it's going to be. For the most part, we have not had that issue, at least during my tenure, and I don't think your tenure, but that's one of our internal controls that we have.
And the city is held accountable through HUD. I mean, they monitor us, they evaluate us, they audit what we're doing to make sure that we stay in compliance with the administration of those funds. So there is an accountability level there for the city as the grantees, as Leticia was saying. So
there's an additional level where HUD comes and monitors our programs as well, and that's the top tier.
Does the city make available the, I guess more or less what they're looking for in people that they, in organizations that they fund? Because I know that the city has recently funded or given funding to Salvation Army, and while I'm sure they've done good work, they also have a history of denying service to people simply for being gay or trans or not wanting to be proselytized to. I want to know what the city's standards are, basically. Is that anywhere, or is it something that I would have to email someone to know about?
We have criteria that the agency has to meet for funding. As far as the programming on that side, I mean, we do have to have rights to everyone. I mean, I don't know if you want to speak to some of that.
So
Structure.
as part of the agreement, the agency is supposed to have a system for people to file grievances. And part of our monitoring is reviewing those grievances. And if we find that is occurring, then we file sanctions on the agency.
If an unhoused person they have grievances because they are a member of the LGBTQIA plus community, or there's someone who, abused drugs, because a lot of these places don't accept them because of these certain situations, they're unhoused. They don't have access to electronics, to means to be able to hold, tell people about their grievances. They might not have direct communication with some of your programs or your staff, or find it difficult to. So how can they tell their grievances to ensure that, these people that the city gives these organizations the money instead of running the programs themselves, that they hold them accountable? Because those are the most vulnerable populations. We have the unhoused community, but those people in particular are the ones that are, very vulnerable in this situation. And so, that's another thing, going back to what Guy was saying about, having something that, we can hold the city accountable for, because I can't go to Salvation Army and say, hey, this is what these people are facing, these particular communities are facing, and they'll be like, okay, well, they're not, according to me, So, how can we?
Well, for those individuals, I mean, that's one of the objectives with our homeless outreach program, is that we have direct contact, with those individuals. So, we can be that conduit for them if there's a situation that's occurred, and again, trying to assist them with that process. It's like you said, they're not going to have access to electronics and so forth. So we make every attempt through our outreach to have that direct contact, to have those conversations. And, our outreach coordinator is familiar with the homeless community and where they're located. And so, so she has those conversations on a daily basis. So we're trying to build trust so that we can provide that assistance.
Where can we find out more information about like those outreach programs and how they're connecting with them? Because we have members of our own community who have had to create their own nonprofits to directly communicate with those people. And those are the things we hear whenever we volunteer there, and we talk to our friends who run these organizations. So it seems like there's some kind of disconnect, because, the unhoused population who shows up to receive some of these services, that obviously the city is unable to meet because they need to, we're filling this gap. Like where can we, I'm going off on a tangent, but where can we get more information exactly about these outreach programs? Like,
Well, just, if I can make that clear, so the city's not providing direct services. I mean, we
Yeah.
are making those connections to the services, but we've got, the information available within our offices as far as what those resources are. And again, to help help people with that. And we've got folks that can have that discussion with them, again, if there's a grievance. And so we can give you that information. It's on our website as far as our available resources and service providers that are out there. To make that connection, but we have staff that's happy to speak with you, once we're done here, we can do that offline and get you that information.
I just want to add, the agencies should have grievance policies to where, someone can file a grievance, but if you're not able to file a grievance there, or you feel like, they're not gonna do anything with it, you can come to the city. If we're funding them, you can come to us and let us know what's going on, and we'll go out and monitor and try and address the
And
issue.
again, anyone is welcome to come into City Hall, come into our offices and have that discussion with our staff.
There should be no discrimination.
All right, we are a little bit, almost to 10 minutes after, so we need to wrap this up. I do appreciate, and we all appreciate you all coming out and your participation in this. We know you're taking time away from your day, away from your families, but we do appreciate you. I don't know, if council member, I don't know if you have anything you'd like to say in closing. I'm gonna put you on the spot, but.
That's right. Just to reiterate, thanks so much for coming out tonight. I think these are very good questions. I learned some stuff on Monday night when I attended that session. I think I'll learn more stuff tonight, more information tonight. So this is all good. This is all gonna help to inform what I do on the council. I can talk to other council members about that then as well. I really want to appreciate the staff coming out tonight as well. I know this is a separate sort of issue. I hope you're getting flex time for this. Do all that sort of thing. Well, if you're not, let me know about that as well.
Yeah, everybody's gonna be off on Saturday, so that's no problem.
Thanks so much, folks.
All right, well, thank you all. Thank you, Bill.
Thank
for,
you, Bill.
leading us through the presentation.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you. Y'all have a great evening.
Nice job.